What's going on, everyone? Hope you're all doing great today. So, the PS5 just got a brand new update, and if you've already turned on your console recently, you probably saw that notification pop up for the latest system software patch, version 25.007-12.20.00. I've spent some time checking it out, reading through what Sony officially listed, and also messing around with the update to see what's actually new, what's subtle, and what's probably hiding behind the usual system performance improvements message that Sony likes to throw in. So in this video, I want to break everything down for you in a clear, relaxed way. We'll talk about what's new, what it changes, what's probably going on behind the scenes, and whether it's worth updating right away or if you should wait a bit. Now, this update might look small at first glance. It's around 1.3 gigabytes in size, which is about average for these PS5 system updates. Sometimes that means it's just a minor patch, but sometimes these small downloads hide meaningful improvements, especially for those who use a lot of accessories or play online frequently. This one is definitely more on the refinement side, but it's got some thoughtful quality of life stuff that makes it worth mentioning. The first noticeable change, and honestly one of the most practical updates Sony has added recently, is the ability to view the serial numbers for your hardware directly on the console. That might not sound exciting right away, but it's surprisingly useful. Until now, if you ever needed to find your console's serial number, for example, for warranty purposes, customer support, or registering a repair, you had to either physically look at the tiny sticker on the back or bottom of the console, tail, which is awkward, or check the original box if you kept it. Now, after this update, you can just go to Settings, then System Software, and you'll see a new option called Console Information. Inside that, there's a section for the serial number. It's simple, but very helpful, especially if your PS5 is tucked into a tight entertainment setup where you can't easily move it around. And Sony didn't stop there. They also extended this feature to accessories, which I actually think is even more convenient. You can now check the serial numbers for your DualSense controllers directly from the console. You just go to Settings, then Accessories, then General, then Advanced Settings, and you'll find an option that says View Serial Number. That's a big help because if you ever need to send in a controller for repair or verify which one is which, especially if you have multiple DualSense controllers for couch co-op or family use, you can check it digitally without flipping the controller around looking for that super tiny printed code. It's small, but it's one of those thoughtful touches that shows Sony is trying to streamline the experience, especially as more people own multiple controllers and accessories. Now, speaking of controllers, another thing Sony quietly mentioned in this update is improvements to the DualSense Edge wireless controller. If you don't know, that's Sony's premium pro-style controller for the PS5, the one with customizable back buttons, adjustable triggers, and swappable thumbsticks. It's already a really solid piece of hardware, but some players have noticed that occasionally it can act up with firmware updates or connection issues, especially when switching profiles or using it wired versus wireless. This update includes stability improvements specifically targeted at the DualSense Edge, which likely means smoother firmware syncing and fewer chances of weird input lags or disconnections. I did a bit of testing after updating, and I can confirm it seems to pair up and reconnect a little faster than before. It's subtle, but if you use that controller regularly, you'll probably notice it feels a bit snappier when switching between console menus or waking it from rest mode. Beyond those specific features, the rest of this update is focused on the usual system performance and stability upgrades. And while that phrase gets thrown around a lot, it's not just filler. It usually means Sony is optimizing how the PS5 handles background tasks, networking, and memory usage. For instance, they might tweak how system notifications appear, how fast settings load, or how efficiently the console manages game caching and suspend states. I didn't notice any huge visual differences after updating, but I did notice that navigating through menus, especially the settings and library sections, felt slightly more fluid. That could be placebo, but it's likely Sony tuned some background performance threads. One thing I always like to test after a system update is rest mode, because historically, that's been one of the trickier parts of PS5 updates. Some of you might remember how early firmware versions had weird issues where the PS5 wouldn't wake properly from rest mode or would unexpectedly power down. Over time, Sony's cleaned that up a lot, and this update keeps that trend going. I tested rest mode with multiple games suspended, Spider-Man 2, Helldivers 2, and even Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and the console woke up perfectly each time. No crashes, no freezing. The controller connected instantly too. So it looks like this patch helps keep system stability nice and consistent. Now, it's always interesting to notice what Sony doesn't mention directly in their patch notes. They're often very brief in their descriptions, but these updates tend to include small back-end tweaks that improve things like voice chat reliability, network latency for remote play, or even better handling of external storage drives. I plugged in my external SSD and noticed that file transfers between internal and external storage felt slightly faster. Again, that could be perception, but considering Sony's been refining how the PS5 reads from different storage formats since the addition of M.2 SSD support, it wouldn't surprise me if this update optimized that further. Another little detail worth pointing out is how this update continues Sony's trend of gradually preparing the PS5 ecosystem for wider accessory compatibility. They've been slowly integrating new features that tie into the PS5 Pro rumors we've been hearing about, the Pro model that's supposedly coming sometime next year. Adding features like serial number tracking and controller firmware refinements could easily be groundwork for a unified management system across PS5 and the next model. It makes sense because if Sony plans to introduce more advanced accessories or cross-compatible hardware, having this internal tracking system ready to go makes life easier for both users and support teams. Now, in terms of download and installation, this update's rollout is completely global. It's mandatory if you want to play online, so even if you don't manually trigger it, your console will likely prompt you soon or automatically install it in rest mode overnight. The download took about 5 minutes on my connection, and the installation process took another 5 or so. Nothing unusual, no long rebuilding database messages or file rescans like we sometimes see after big seasonal updates. It's smooth and straightforward. If you're one of those players who prefers to update manually, or if your console has trouble connecting online, you can always update it using a USB stick via safe mode. Sony's support site has the latest version file available for download, and you can copy it to a drive under the right folder structure. The PS5 will recognize it automatically when you boot into safe mode. It's also a good way to repair system software if something ever goes wrong. I also checked compatibility with a few newer features like PS5's share screen and the Discord integration that was added earlier this year, and everything seems to work perfectly fine after the update. No issues with voice chat, no new permission prompts, and all the connected app features like game invites and streaming still run smoothly. That's always a good sign because sometimes system updates can cause minor desync issues with external apps like Discord, Spotify, or even YouTube streaming, but this one plays nice across the board. Now, one of the most common questions people ask with every new firmware update is whether it affects performance in games. Does it change frame rates? Does it alter fan speed or system cooling behavior? From everything I tested, there's no performance degradation or noticeable difference in how games run. If anything, background system usage seems slightly more efficient. Games like Call of Duty, Warzone, and Fortnite load a little faster to the main menu, though that could also be down to recent game patches. Still, I like to note those subtle changes because sometimes Sony sneaks in firmware tweaks that improve load balancing between the GPU and CPU to help reduce stutter during intense moments. Nothing official this time, but the system feels rock solid. And since I know a few of you out there like to explore things deeply, yes, this update doesn't change or remove anything related to M.2 SSD compatibility. If you've got an internal SSD expansion, everything should stay exactly the same. I tried both a Western Digital SN80 Fit X and a Samsung 990 Pro in my console after updating. No issues whatsoever. The console detected them instantly, no reformat prompts, and load times were consistent with previous firmware. So, the real question, should you install this update right now or wait a bit? Personally, I say go for it. This is a stable official public release, and it brings small but meaningful improvements. There are no known bugs reported by the community so far, no sudden issues with rest mode, Bluetooth, or game crashes. If anything, it just makes the system a little cleaner and more polished. Plus, since Sony made it mandatory for online play, you'll have to update sooner or later anyway, especially if you plan to jump into multiplayer games or access the PlayStation Store. Another interesting point to think about is how Sony's updates have been pacing lately. They seem to be releasing smaller, more focused patches instead of big seasonal overhauls. This suggests they're really tightening up the PS5 ecosystem as it matures. The console's been out for several years now, and these kinds of updates show they're thinking about user experience from a maintenance standpoint, not just adding flashy features. The PS5 UI is already clean and fast, so now it's about making sure every corner of the software feels smooth and consistent. I think the addition of serial number access inside the system menus is a subtle but significant step toward transparency. It's one of those features that shows Sony's paying attention to how people actually use their consoles day to day. Whether it's registering repairs, verifying hardware, or managing multiple controllers, this small feature saves time and reduces frustration. And when combined with the stability work on the DualSense Edge, it's a sign Sony's investing in long-term reliability. Now, if you're wondering about the future, yeah, this update doesn't add any flashy new features like themes, folders, or UI customizations. Those might come later, possibly with PS5 Pro launch or the next major firmware milestone. But what we're getting now are the foundation updates, the ones that make sure when those big features arrive, everything runs perfectly underneath. So, to wrap this up, this PS5 system update might not be revolutionary, but it's one of those solid confidence building patches. It's fast to install, adds a genuinely useful feature for identifying your console and accessories, improves controller stability, and keeps the system running reliably. No drama, no bugs, just a smoother PS5 experience. If you've been holding off, go ahead and install it. You won't regret it. And if you notice any hidden tweaks or changes after updating, maybe something subtle like faster wait times, cleaner animations, or a new icon behavior, drop it in the comments. I always love seeing what other people pick up that I might have missed. That's the beauty of this community. Everyone catches something different. Anyway, that's the full breakdown for the PS5 System Software Update 25.07 12.20.00. It's stable, it's practical, and it's another step forward for the console. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you found this helpful, hit that like button, maybe subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll keep you posted whenever Sony rolls out the next firmware update. Till then, enjoy your games, keep your console up to date, and I'll catch you in the next one.